Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of the Adamola Bookmen podcast, where we read and review footballers' autobiographies. This week we're doing The Gaffer, The Trials and Tribulations of a Football Manager by Neil Warnock. Johnny, Neil Warnock. What do you think? What were your impressions of Neil Warnock before you read this book? Listen to the book. You fucking
before I listened to the book, read by Neil Warnock.
Oh, it was read by Neil Warnock.
Yeah, and I tell you what I reckon now. Warnock's issue is, I think he's got a very dislikable face because he's quite nice to listen to. And, you know, he's a northerner, right? So there's all of these lovely turns of phrases and stuff, you know. He's got a cat and else chance. All of that kind of stuff, you know. Absolutely loves it. Lovely. Yeah. Warnock, I suppose, the truth is that my view of him doesn't veer too far from his actual reputation as kind of a bit of a crotchety whiner who's always on the refs' backs. I like him a lot more now after having read the book or listened to the book. But I don't know if those things are necessarily incorrect because he's a petty man, isn't he?
Oh, he's a petty man, all right. I mean, in many ways, this is Neil Warnock's bouncing back, isn't it? Like, needless to say, I had the last laugh. Yeah, he grinds a lot of axes in this book. But it's a reasonable read. I mean, I'll tell you, the bombshell revelation for me, Johnny, reading this book is that Stephen Warnock is not Neil Warnock's son. I always thought Stephen Warnock was Neil Warnock's son. I've always thought that was the case.
Oh, really?
For years and years. I always thought that. How many Warnocks are there? Well, apparently two.
And he played for him?
He did? Where did he play for him?
Oh, maybe it was at Leeds, maybe, was it?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Do you know what this reminded me of? I don't know if it looms quite so large in the British consciousness, but certainly in Ireland, for people of my generation, after The Simpsons, Father Ted is like the most quoted thing amongst people my age. And I don't know if you remember when Ted receives the award for the Golden Cleric Award for the Outstanding Priest, no? Do you remember that?
No, I don't think so.
Well, he wins this award anyway, and he gives a speech. It's like, and now we move on to liars.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. Like, yeah,
There's a bit of that. He's very, very, very petty, but I got a kick out of it, out of his pettiness. That's, you know, we complained about Wenger, and this book has a lot of the things that Wenger's book lacked, in that he talked about people positively and very negatively at times. And that was very enjoyable.
Well, Wenger even pops up in this book and manages to be funnier in that one sentence than his whole book. There's an incident where he's playing at Highbury, or the Emirates, and Warnock saying, like, yeah, Wenger said, look, I do not want to have to hear you today. And he's like, look here, Arsene, the dugouts are miles apart. You'll never hear me. You will find a way. He will find a way. And that's funnier than anything that happens. It's not that funny, but it's funnier than anything that fucking happens in Wenger's book.
But the pettiness, there's so many kind of dimensions to the pettiness. He's petty in the usual ways, you know, like he says himself that he remembers every kind of referee who's ever made a decision against him. He remembers them and he stores that away. But he'll also he'll quote every famous line that he's ever made in the press conference. He'll quote it verbatim. And I
made Sharon laugh when I commented. Yeah, his wife's always laughing at every fucking thing he says. Like, I don't know.
He'll always find a way to crowbar in how he made a risk on such and such a thing, and that decision paid off. There's a lot of that in the book. Like,
needless to say, I had the last laugh.
Needless to say, I had the last laugh. Like the most common, the biggest theme in the book is the bet that he took on Adel Tarat. That's like the main part of the book.
I think you're right. It's like that. Famously, Michael Jordan took everything personally and he used everything as an incentive to get better. And I guess he must do that, but he's just doing it in a sort of championship environment as opposed to at the very pinnacle of a game. There's one bit. I think it's Mark Halsey, the referee. He goes to see the referee before the game because first of all he makes a quote saying a lot of managers send the kit man in to say hello to referee, but I like to show him respect. So he goes in to see Halsey. Halsey offers to shake his hand. He's like, I can't, Mark. I can't be a hypocrite. I can't shake your hand. Then fucks off back into the dressing room, giving it, you're going to get nothing from the ref today. What are you doing, man? It's counterproductive.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's it. Penny to a ridiculous point. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, there must be. I get it. Some refs must have it in for you a bit. Like, I mean, there must be that. But man, he must have some cognitive dissonance there. Like, but he's like, it's all against me. They're all ganging up on Warnock. I know it's one of the famous quotes from the 90s. He's shouting at a linesman like, "Go on, Lino. You go home and tell your wife you fuck Warnock. Go on." My accent's getting a bit carried away there, but you get the point.
There was one.
Anyway,
just on the pettiness again, the year that he brought QPR up, which is kind of the center and a piece of the book, right? He says that he was the only manager of the particular vision, the only manager to win his division who wasn't the winning man. Jesus Christ, I'm making a fucking names of this.
So every other league winning manager was nominated for manager of the year, but Warnock, despite winning the championship, was not. Am I right there, Johnny?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And so like I think Ferguson won it and whoever else in League One and League Two, and Paul Lambert of Norwich won it for the championship. But everyone knew he shouldn't have got it, and it should have been me, including Paul Lambert.
That's right. That's right. It was a hollow victory. A hollow victory to beat out Warnock. Well, you done it there, Managers Association. You fuck Warnock. In all honesty, I mean, with that, obviously he's making it look at that, but it was quite an achievement to get QPR promoted that year, wasn't it? Like, I mean, he was relying on, crikey, the most unreliable people in the world.
Have you seen the documentary that he refers to a few times, the 4-year plan?
Yes, I have. I watched it last night.
Yeah, I watched it as well. That's a pile of fun, isn't it?
Oh, it really is fun. I mean, Oh man, rich people, they're the worst, aren't they? Just the worst people in the world.
Like Warnock says in the book that he was shocked that Briatore allowed it to happen. Like he gave these documentary makers, Fabio Briatore, the owner, he gave these documentary makers like a lot of access, and he is just an asshole, like gold-plated asshole. But yeah, it makes for great TV.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great one.
This is another non-autobiography, but he does something that, well, first of all, we can forget about Milner, the worst book we've done. But even the Crouch one, I thought had a good idea, but what Warnock does is what Crouch should have done, is that he has these different topics, whatever, training, match day, this kind of stuff, and he goes through it. But he also has a story running through the book, whereas Crouch just told you this is like, he would throw in the odd autobiographical detail, but he just talk kind of roving around his career about the particular things, celebrations or whatever it might be. But there is a story running through this, and the book is a whole lot better for it. And the story is mostly the year he was with QPR.
And there's a bit with Palace at the start, right? It's the end of his time at Palace and his promotion and his season in the Premier League. And within that, he tells stories from the past.
Yeah, and there's briefly, because as you said, like he had to get the last laugh. So he goes to Leeds, but then he gets sacked there as well. So that kind of...
I mean, for me, it's Warnock as a manager of, my team has pretty much been a championship side in the time that he's been. He's someone I've always coveted. I've always wanted him. He just seems full value, and he just does seem to get the best out of players.
I guess we just follow the kind of the thread of the book, right? Like he does kind of weave in and out elements from his pre-managerial life. So he was a lower league player, played for teams like Chesterfield and Hartlepool, teams a little bit lower kind of profile than the teams that he managed. he was a much more successful manager than he was a player.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he openly admits he wasn't a good footballer. And he also says, as he says, like a lot of his career was just trying to prove people were wrong. If he got let go from a team, he wanted to prove they were wrong. So he'd go on to another shitty football team and play 11 games a season there. But he knew what he was. And I guess, you know, you're getting paid to play football. Lovely stuff.
And he was also what he describes as a chiropodist.
Yeah, famously, like he had a few string to his bow, but yeah, that seems to be the one that stuck with him, eh? It's the old foot doctor,
How would you say that word?
chiropodist.
He says a kind of a hard C. I would say chiropodist.
Chiropodist.
Yeah, he says
Oh, he says it with a hard C.
yeah, chiropodist. One thing that he talks about quite a lot is the fact that he turned down Chelsea in 1991. Did you know that he turned down Chelsea in 1991? He must have mentioned it 10 times in the book.
Yeah, and I think he probably regrets it, doesn't he? That was his chance at the big time. I mean, that was a thing at the time because obviously he was county manager, and that's what made him famous. And yeah, two successive promotions to get county into the old First Division. He was like that Kieran McKenna at Ipswich, right? He was the equivalent of that in the 90s.
Yeah, as you say, it starts with when Warnock was at Palace, and significantly, there was two elements really that stood out from here. He loves Simon Jordan, and he doesn't like being in administration.
No, being in administration is really difficult for a manager, he tells us, and I believe him.
Doesn't
and yeah, he really
great.
does love Simon Jordan, doesn't he? I mean, there's not many that do, but he's one of them. Like, I think Simon Jordan is a top bloke. In fact, he was saying like, "Oh, I knew the answer before I even asked the question." That's what a good manager chairman relationship looks like. I mean, yeah, they were finishing each other's sentences. A real love affair there.
Yeah. So then,
who else does he love, Johnny? Before we start, who else does Neil Warnock love? I mean, there's a couple.
Who else does it? Sean Derry. He loves Sean Derry. He loves Clint. Derry. He loves Clint Hill.
He loves Clint Hill.
His wife says that she would like if her son was as tough as Clint Hill. It's a funny thing to say. He loved Amit, the guy who features.
Yeah, he loved Amit Bhatia. I don't know why, because God, he looked like a slimy prick in that documentary. Oh, just take your shades off, you fucking knobhead. There's one bit. It's like, he's with his bodyguard. He's like, why do you look like Tom Cruise and I look like your bodyguard? It's like, you don't look like Tom Cruise. You really don't.
Do you see in that documentary when Bernie Eccleston shows up and he's in the changing room complaining about the money that they're spending on water bottles?
Bernie Eccleston is an absolute piece of work, isn't he? Horrible, horrible man.
Who else does he love? Let me think.
I'll give you a clue. He's the best keeper in England.
He absolutely loves Paddy Kenny. The best keeper. He signed him like 4 times or something, did he?
Yeah, he has. He absolutely loves Paddy Kenny. There's a thing where Paddy Kenny has a cancer scare, and he knows about it before Paddy Kenny. They ring him up first. Got some bad news from Paddy. You're gonna have to tell him. It's like, bloody hell. Yeah, Paddy's your son, and you're his dad. He's going to give you the bad news. It all turns out all right for Paddy Kenny.
And you know who doesn't like Paddy Kenny? Rob Green and the fans of QPR.
Fair enough. Yeah, I kind of like Paddy Kenny. He's sort of like a modern day Kevin Pressman. Well, he's not even modern day.
He was probably playing at the same time as Kevin Pressman.
Just a big fat lump. Good for you. Go on.
Yeah. So just on that thing about when he eventually got booted out of QPR, he was put out of the team when they were in the Premier League. They signed Rob Green, and Paddy Kenny got drunk and texted everybody and was abusing Rob Green, and texted Tony Fernandez and was abusing him as well. So he was out in his ear.
Just a couple more people he loves. Phil Jagielka and Michael Brown. He loved them lads. Apparently at training he'd say, "Come on, sons." He called them his sons, no one else, and invite them to stand under his umbrella.
Stand under the umbrella, yeah. That was funny.
I just think that's funny, isn't it? Like, I mean, he tells all sorts of great stories. There's one story where, this is a real good one. Pascal Chimbonda wanted to wear a hat, and Keith Curl said, "No, you shouldn't wear a hat." So we went into Warnock, and Warnock said, "Let him wear his hat." Anyway, that's just one of the many great stories you can find in The Gaffer, Trials and Tribulations of a Football Manager.
On the administration, Palace went into administration, and essentially that's difficult because the administrators are just penny pinching all the time. And what Warnock, I think, does quite well. The book is called Trials and Tribulations of a Football Manager. And you do, I think, get a decent insight into the day-to-day grind of being a football manager. Like he talks about transfer deadline day. He talks about like his own routine, and he's like an insanely superstitious character, and he'd be telling you like what he eats for breakfast of 2 pieces of toast, and like he really he really gets into it. Like it's
No, he does. No, he likes an omelette. Likes an omelette, and if there's a little bit of toast left over, I'll have that with marmalade. Another great story from the Gaffer, the Trials and Tribulations. He likes a bit of marmalade in his toast. He's just like us. They're just like us, these football managers. I like marmalade too.
Yeah, but he does. I think he does like so when he talks about administration, he's essentially talking about he like they were going somewhere on the bus, and the bus driver's like, "I've just been told not to bring you. My boss told me not to bring you because we won't get paid." So he claims he promised to pay the bus company himself, so they got to go there anywhere. And yeah, like there is just a lot of that about how Warnock stepped in and whatever he did was right, and whatever everyone else was doing to bring him to that situation was wrong. Yeah, there's a lot of that, but I did want like
it doesn't matter. I mean, he can be bus drivers, it can be anyone. He can he can turn his ire on anybody. For instance, there's an example of some roadworks 35 years ago. 30 fucking 5 years ago. I was driving home, look at roadworks, and Reading fans were trying to get home as well. I didn't get in until 12:30, and there were only two people walking. Oh, that's right. I said walking, not working, walking. Absolute joke.
oh yeah, I do.
He was
remember
furious
that.
about roadworks from 30 years ago. I think that's pretty good going.
At the start, I was thinking, well, I'm not sure about this, but I really I warmed to Warnock, and the book. There is maybe a bit of tedious detail at times, but the book is, yeah, he's good value, to be fair to Warnock. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like that. I was happy to read about his marmalade, and I was happy to hear about his rage at the roadworks. Yeah, it's not boring, and like those silly details are kind of fun and do paint a picture of the man.
Yeah, and
And that picture is a man of 76 years old. He's just like your dad. That's what he's like. He's very much like your dad. I wonder if he'll be playing this music in 50 years. He tells his players as he comes into the dressing room. Doesn't like modern music. Oh no, things are better in the old days.
That's all really from the past part, isn't there? That and his love affair with Jordan. But he really does get.
Yeah.
He gets into detail with the QPR stuff. He took over at QPR after they'd sacked 4 managers in 6 months or something. They were absolutely racing through them. And this is what you see in that 4-year plan documentary. Warnock says that he wouldn't have taken the job had he known he would be kind of reporting answerable really to Flavio Briatore, because Briatore's reputation is as somebody who interferes with everything, team selection, you name it. And you see that in that documentary. But Warnock got reassurances from one of the co-owners, this Indian guy, Amit, whose father is some steel billionaire, that he was going to buy out Briatore and Eccleston. So he just had to hold on for a few weeks, and then that would be the end of Briatore, but it's not how it panned out. And do you remember in the book, he says he went over to meet this Amit, and there was a Picasso hanging on your man's wall. On the wall of his house.
Identified by young William Warnock. Yeah, William Warnock, who at the time must have been 8 years old. Dad, is that Picasso? Bollocks. Could William fucking... I'll tell you what, he loves Paddy Kenny. He loves William Warnock more. If you're fucking Neil Warnock's other kids, have a look. He's his favourite.
Yeah.
William's his favourite by a long way.
Yeah. And then they find
he bangs on about William.
He does bang on about William. And then there's another Van Gogh just lying around the place, apparently.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Again, identified by his 8-year-old son. So
how many How many paintings did Vincent van Gogh sell in his lifetime? Oh,
Oh, it's one of them. One,
yes,
none, one.
one. Yes. So yeah, when he took over, QPR were struggling for survival in the championship, and he steered them to safety. And then the next year, he brought them up. So that's pretty spectacular stuff, right?
It is. It is. Absolutely is. No, he did a fabulous job. And you see, my understanding of the time there, at least my thoughts were that QPR were swimming with money at this point, but apparently that's not the case, right? I mean, he really had to do some wheeler dealing back there. So yeah, it really was a hell of an achievement, and that's it. And this is how we get onto Adel Taarabt. I mean, he put his full faith in what is basically an overgrown child, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
Taarabt fella, crikey, lads.
And how good was he in the championship, Taarabt?
Yeah, like head and shoulders. I mean, he looked like a champion. He looked like a Champions League player playing in the Championship because he was so gifted.
And Warnock's whole thing, he says again, because he's always patting himself on the back, is no other manager will ever, like, you were no one before I came along. You were in and out of the team. No one would put any faith in you. And Taarabt, then when he was doing well, was constantly trying to leave for bigger teams. And Warnock was saying, if you should stick around with me and it'll be good for your career, you'll get better and all the rest of it. And I looked, he really didn't do anything afterwards. He's playing in UAE now, I think.
Oh, is he? Because I knew he was at Benfica or Summit for a bit.
He was.
It was a bit of a talk. Oh, it was. Because I can remember he played some Champions League and everyone was like, fucking hell, he's still about.
He's obviously a bit of a prick.
Yeah, he absolutely indulges him. I'll tell you what, one thing very quickly is Warnock does not appreciate foreign players playing for their countries, does he? He does not appreciate that at all. Oh, to play for England, the greatest honour of your life. But if you're going to go and play for another country, he's furious. He's absolutely furious. Some lad went off to play against Equatorial Guinea, and he couldn't have sounded more Brexit if he could have tried. Oh, I got off to play them world beaters from Equatorial Guinea. It's a fucking qualifier, mate. You do have to play them still. You know, football doesn't just exist in Europe. Yeah, he is very Brexit there.
He says a few things. At some point, he says, and it was Taarabt related. Taarabt put him in a bad mood. He says, and it was the day of the royal wedding. And as a royalist, I should have been in a good mood. It's like, how old are you, fella? Like, what?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't to do with Taarabt. It was to do with it was Neil Custis writing in the Sun that QPR could potentially get a 15-point deduction. I woke up, and as a royalist, I should have been happy because it's a royal wedding day. But no, that Neil Custis from the Sun had written absolutely outrageous lies that we might lose 15 points. I mean, I don't know. I guess royalists, as he describes himself, which I don't think anyone's used that word for him, but just like leap out of bed, wake up, Sharon, it's a wonderful day. Prince William's going to marry his beautiful bride today. But what? Sharon, have you seen Sun? Oh, no. Look what Neil Custis has written here. Like, the players are going to be in the doldrums now. Yeah, he was very, very. Yeah, his whole royal wedding day was ruined by Neil Custis writing an erroneous report on a potential 15-point deduction. You got to feel sorry for him. Poor royalist had his special day ruined.
Do you think that Neil is team Kate and William or team making it happy?
I think I know. And he obviously called William after Prince William, didn't he? I mean, I know I've just made that like that's obviously where it came from.
Yeah. There was a few other things. He said a few other things that were, yeah. He's got traditional values, should we say.
He does have traditional values. Now, like you see him, I've done some media work. I very much enjoyed working with Alan Brazil. Yeah, I bet you did. I bet you did like working with Alan Brazil. And Alan Brazil why does Alan Brazil like working with Neil Warnock?
Go on, tell me.
Because Neil brings the packing with him. Packing?
Oh, yeah, that was another.
For you posh people, that's a word for a packed lunch.
Yeah.
Is it packing? What? Posh people? I've never in my life heard anyone call a packed lunch packing.
Is it an order?
I just must associate with posh people everywhere I go, like packing.
Do you know did you know the expression soft soap?
Is that when you can be gentle with someone, like, right?
Yeah, it says like he gave me a bit of soft soap and then essentially kind of lathered someone up before giving them some bad news later on. Would you say rat-eyed for drunk? Is that
No,
another
rat
definition?
arsed. I've never heard rat eyed. I saw that.
He said raggedy ass rovers at one point as well. I like
No, I
that.
like that one.
Yeah.
Oh, talking about being in a good mood as well, I'm just going to circle back to the potential Paddy Kenny cancer diagnosis. He was in a good mood that morning as well, Johnny. Do you remember why? He'd been on a bike ride, and I saw a kingfisher. I hadn't seen one for ages. I was in a good mood. Saw a kingfisher. And then I had to hear a bloody telephone conversation telling me there's blood in Paddy Kenny's urine. And I'd just seen a kingfisher. Would you believe it? I think it's quite sweet. Like, is that worth mentioning there, ghostwriter? Yes. Yes, I'd seen kingfisher. I'd seen kingfisher when I was on bike. But then Paddy Kenny got blood in his urine. Oh, come on.
Okay.
Also, there's some more useful information. If you're on a diet, avoid prawns, high in cholesterol. Didn't know that, but now I do. You see, this Milner is what you should be writing about, son.
What this book has as well. So there's kind of obviously it's set in the kind of fringes of the Premier League and the Championship. So there's a lot of kind of smaller clubs and the grounds that smaller clubs are playing in. And there's detail about like rickety grounds and there's detail about traveling
Yeah, but
to
not as
smaller
rickety as grounds in Italy, though, Johnny. I
Or
went to
indeed.
Bergamo. They got a horrible concrete thing. I stood up and hit my head. I kept it quiet. Didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to show my weakness. Yeah, so I mean, bad stadiums in England, but even worse in Italy. Brexit means Brexit.
But yeah, there's also quite a lot of, and I suppose this is consistent with this kind of Brexit kind of attitude. It's quite nostalgic. Like he finishes with the book with a total tirade against modern players, which is not unusual, but it's absolutely like he says essentially that I don't think I'd like to be a manager today, and he continues to manage for like 20 years after writing the book.
It certainly does. Yeah, he's only been dragged away now, like kicking and screaming. Yeah, he does have some very old-fashioned values there.
But a surprising advocate for female officials. That was a surprise.
Well, I highlighted that as well, Johnny. Yes, he is a big advocate of referees. He thinks female referees. He thinks the players show them more respect, and he also thinks that it's an excellent idea to have a female referee because it will help bring about human rights across the world. Because when hideous dictators watch the Premier League with a woman referee, they'll have a little second thought. Maybe we should let them drive. If they can referee a football game, a Premier League football game, maybe they can drive.
Yeah. And do you remember why? Do you remember what he uses to measure the fact that he believes that women are good officials?
No, tell me.
He just doesn't remember being absolutely outraged by the decisions of any of them. Like that's why he thinks like he says, I don't remember being robbed by a female official, and because it says he remembers every single grievance, and I believe that. Like he talks.
I do believe he's got a little red book.
He talks about Graham Paul like robbing him at one stage, and then Graham Paul wrote something about him in a column that he wrote for the newspaper, and then at various points throughout the book afterwards, he mentions such and such a team won that day with an assist from Graham Paul. He just throws in a few things on Graham Paul, and again, that's just what you want in a book. But yeah, he says that to be fair, he says he would have laughed at the idea of women officials at one point in his life, but he thinks that Keys and Gray, who you would think he probably likes on some level, overstepped the mark, and that women officials have been doing a super job.
I think he gives a caveat. I think he says he does like Keane Gray before he puts the boot in, but I think there was a misjudgment there. Yeah. But the thing is, they're lucky he wrote that book before he had a female referee give a bad decision against him, right? Because then that would have been like, we're all fucking useless now. I know you'll think I'm old-fashioned, but women can't keep up because of their breasts. They can't run as fast. Yeah, I think he would have turned had he had a bad experience. That may not have been quite as progressive as it seemed.
He singles out Mike Riley, who was the head of the kind of referees association, and what So Warnock says that he himself was a ref, and he says this to, show that he understands the role of refs, but then he's really, really putting the boot in. And he says that essentially the problem is that referees have never played football, and they just know the rules rather than the game. And he singles out Mike Riley as being a big problem, who is a terrible ref. And he says that as the head of the Referees Association, he's just trying to create clones of himself. Yeah, give me more of that, please.
Sinister Mike Riley in his little laboratory at like Stockwell Park, building hideous Mike Riley clones to release on Premier League pitches up and down the country. Like, you will respect me, you will respect my authority.
Something that was quite enjoyable was the quotes at the start of the book, at the start of the chapters. Some of them are fine, but some of them are really quite funny. I think that Brian Clough one is presumably famous, is it? You obviously know Clough quite well. I haven't seen the lad, but he comes highly recommended by my greengrocer. Now that is a nice quote.
There's a nice quote. The one that stuck out for me was Paul Merson.
Yeah, I have that one. Yeah.
He talks about being a manager. He goes, sometimes I'm still at work at 3 p.m. And I had to read it again. I had to read it as, 3 p.m. You funny mess. Yeah, it's nice.
Shall we talk about Tarat then? He made Tarat captain and said he was going to build the team and the tactics around Tarat. And then, of course, Tarat might just not show up on any given day, but he would be calling in the senior players. And here we see kind of really what he's talking about is the traditional English players, isn't he? Your Sean Derrys, your Paddy Kenny's, whoever, and essentially saying, just please be patient with Adele. Just please be patient. Like, so you'd be talking about Tarat, the rest of the team kind of saying that he was a bit of a dick, really.
No, basically they were banned from slagging him off. Like, I mean, he's all for banter on the thing, but not against Adele, because you slag off Adele Tarat, he will just walk off the pitch, right? He will walk off the pitch, jump in his car and drive to France.
Yeah, and
drop of the hat, apparently. Anything.
He didn't get player of the year from like the QPR fans or something, and he just won't be left the building.
I mean, that really is pathetic, isn't it? It really is. Like,
oh, do you know what my favorite line in the whole book is? Sorry, and I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but like just on footballers being pathetic, he hates Shaun Wright Philips. He hates Shaun Wright Philips.
But he didn't like Shaun Wright Philips at all, did he? Like staring out the window contemptuously, like just
he thought Warnock was below him. But at one point, Shaun Wright Philips turns 30, and Warnock is saying how footballers are like women, and that as they get older, they don't like their birthdays, and 30 is obviously is a difficult one for a lot of players. But he says that we gave him a cake and he blew out all the candles with one puff. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant.
He's a little lad, but he's got big lungs. Yeah, so there's not that much to say about Tarat, but he really is a bit of a plonker. Like he ring up, they couldn't find him. There's two chapters. One's where's Flavio, as in Briatore, and the other's where's Adele. He will just disappear. They'll be ringing up. No one knows where he is. He'll have a game at 7:45 on a Friday. He'll rock in at like 7 o'clock. I mean, if you have professionals, genuinely, if you have players at the team, though, you'd be pissed off, right? I'd just like, it's just special treatment for him. It's unbelievable what he gets away with. But equally, you're right. I mean, like Warnock, he's never played that well before or since. I mean, basically, he had to be totally indulged, and no other manager was going to do that. Yeah, the only way Tarat was going to succeed was playing in a lower league where a manager would absolutely indulge him to do what he liked, because you can't get away with that in one of the top divisions.
And when he goes up to the Premier League, there's a point where Warnock, because he was trying to leave all throughout the summer, and at one point it seemed like he was going to PSG, and it didn't work out, so he was still there, and he played, but he was rubbish. And Warnock says to him, "You're not fit enough for this. You're not fit enough for this league." Yeah. And Tarat acknowledges it and says he went off to a fat camp. That he said, "I don't think they call that a fat camp."
No, I don't think it was called a fat camp.
Well, yeah, that's where he went. But absolutely, as you say, that was kind of the highlight for Tarat. But it sounded like Chelsea were in for him at some point. Like he had the world at his feet, and unfortunate for him. He's just a bit of an asshole. He wasn't
Yeah,
able
just a
to.
man child. Like he got called out by our old friend Joey Barton. Joey Barton sent a tweet out after a game saying everyone says that Adel Tarat's a genius, but I've not seen it.
Yeah, do you
Which
remember
is
the
nuts for one of your teammates, though, isn't it? Like that is Joey.
remember Joey said in his own book that Tarat wasn't respectful to the tea lady.
Oh, that all comes back. Yeah, okay. So he's once again Joey Barton fully justified in his actions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like anything to do with any of the, especially after watching that 4-year plan documentary, everything about Flavio Briatore I enjoyed because he's just such a prick. And more or less his whole thing is that he will fire Warnock if they go up, which is obviously a great incentive for Warnock. And Warnock keeps hearing this. Like Briatore is interviewed and says, if we go to the Premier League, I'll bring in Marcello Lippi and this kind of thing. He says Briatore is great company. But yeah, essentially that he's always trying to control players. What was interesting, and I think this is where, like I was saying, I think it's a useful insight or helpful, like it's a really interesting insight into how football works, really. It's about like the transfer stuff, how essentially people like Briatore and Fernandez later on would have various people telling them because they know nothing about football. They'd have various friends or various types of people around them telling them they should do this and they should do that. And because they don't know anything about football, they'll take advice from people who don't necessarily know anything about football themselves. So agents can obviously take advantage of people like that. And it's Kia Jarabkin in particular seems to be in the ear of Flavio Briatore a lot. And that's ultimately how Hughes ends up replacing Warnock. But there's a lot of that. Briatore will say you should bring in Materazzi and players like that, people who some agent have approached him about. And Warnock was able to push back against this. And he says that had he not brought QPR up, he just wouldn't have had he wouldn't have been able to push back against these kinds of things. But that's where I found this book was really, really interesting. Those kinds of wrinkles.
Well, two things about transfers. One, and this was an eye opener for me. And they always say this at every transfer window. They're always like, "Oh, teams done their business early, and now they've got the whole pre-season to. This is how you do it." But apparently, clubs don't buy players early just to save on wages. It makes sense, doesn't it? But it never occurred to me. Like, I mean, I'm sure your Man Cities aren't worried about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I bet a championship side, and you're looking at someone on like 20, 30 grand a week, and if you can save 3 months of wages there when they're not playing, you will, won't you? It never occurred to me. I thought that was very enlightening.
But also in the particular context of QPR having gone up with owners who want to cash in by selling the club, they've no interest in signing anyone, obviously, because they're trying to cash out. So they're not going to spend 3 million one day and then like sell the club the following day, right? Because that's not going to be included in the price of the club. So that's more or less what happened to QPR, isn't it? Warnock's QPR. Fernandez came in right at the end. Briatore had been squeezing him, wouldn't let him. Told him he had such and such an amount of money available, but then when he pointed out particular players that he wanted, he wouldn't sanction those buys. So by the time it went, when Fernandez came in, he had this scramble at the last minute, and that was really interesting. So you see the players that he wants to bring in, the kind of Scott Parkers and these kind of people, but he wasn't able to get them. Yeah, I thought that was all very interesting.
Well, and what's more, QPR specifically, you can see that after Warnock left, you can see how the agents have got in the owner's ears, right?
Yeah.
If you remember that QPR team that eventually did get relegated, what a fucking dog's dinner. Like, was it Jose Basingwa, who like played in for Chelsea in a Champions League final, like famously just did not, to use Warnock's parlance, didn't try a leg. Wouldn't try a leg. Wouldn't run, just wouldn't try. And I'm trying to think of the other players at QPR, but I can remember just thinking, why QPR buying all these players? And it all makes sense, right? It was the agents leaning on the naive Tony Fernandez.
Poor Tony. Briatore goes, Fernandez comes in. He says that he ends up buying Shaun Wright Phillips, Anton Ferdinand, misses out on Scott Parker, misses out on Craig Bellamy. But obviously, the most exciting one is they bring in Joey Barton. And of course, I'm just so happy to see Joey roll in because you know there's going to be some drama when Joey's in town.
This is a recurring theme. This is Warnock's white whale. Is Kyle Norton on loan? Oh, if you could just get Kyle Norton on loan. Oh man, but Levy won't let him get Kyle Norton on loan. Oh, the number of times he wants Kyle Norton comes up all the time. Like,
Yeah, he does.
All I need
He
is
does.
final piece of jigsaw, Kyle Norton. But Daniel Levy, clever man, doesn't want to let him go without a big fee. Yeah, man, if he could have got Kyle Norton, everything would have been different. Like,
'Cause he
QPR
did-
Premier League champions
Because he did have Kyle Walker on loan.
for a very short spell because they both sold by Sheffield United on the same day, if I remember rightly. Kyle Walker and Kyle Norton. I remember that happening. I think they were 4 million each. But their careers went in very different directions.
Yeah. Sorry, just to pedal back. We're already on the Premier League. So QPR won the championship, but they had this points deduction thing hanging over their heads. We should just mention.
That's what nearly ruined the Kingfisher Day.
Yeah. So they had bought this Argentinian fella, Alessandro Forlane, and he had a third party owner, and they were in trouble for this. And like this is also in the documentary. So they win the championship and they have this weird thing where they might not know. It's a bit like Forest in the season just gone, right? And where they didn't, like, they might have finished and then had another points deduction and that kind of thing. So they won the league and then they didn't know if they were going to be able to go up.
No points, just fines. No points, just fines. They're all singing around dancing.
Yeah. Yeah. So they came up as champions. Joey comes in and immediately he's the captain. And after a game against Wolves, where himself and Carl Henry are kicking each other around the field, he's like, Barton, he's such a prick. He's going into Warnock and he's demanding improvements. There's something wrong. The training's not good enough. There's a problem with these facilities, la, la, la. And then after every game, he's tweeting about Carl Henry, tweeting about Adel Tarat. He's such he's just a problematic man, as we know.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, and as he said, as his managers always say, like, he's the best in training, first out, last there. He's given it his all, but he just can't shut his fucking stupid mouth.
No, but the falling out between Barton and Tarat is just inevitable. But Barton, for all of having to eke out every drop, and Tarat just strolling in and just being way better at football. It must have really hurt. Must have hurt Joey.
Oh, it would annoy Joey, wouldn't it? It would annoy Joey because if nothing else, that lad gives his all and there's someone just fucking dicking around. It is frustrating though, the way they talk about Tarat, like what he could have been and just couldn't be bothered. Very frustrating.
But we mentioned the Shaun Wright Philips stuff. I saw Shaun Wright Philips stuff was always come across as a nice fella, probably just because he smiles a lot, but he does not come across well in this book. He got booked for dissent, and Warnock always fines players for that kind of thing. And Shaun Wright Philips took the letter and sellotaped it to his back during training. And I think Warnock says it was his biggest disappointment in football, that moment.
It's a weird thing to do, though, isn't it? It is a weird thing to do. And obviously, you could say the players probably could point the finger of hypocrisy at Warnock for arguing against dissent. But he's right. A dissent booking is stupid and they do tie up and with a small squad. That's what he's always pointing out. Like big teams, they benefit from that because they've got big squads. But,
he says
when
that
you've got a little squad and then you've got a player out for 2 games because of stupid swearing at the referee or taking your shirt off. I get it.
He eventually gets the boot from QPR. Do you remember the details of how he got the boot? I can't remember the specifics.
No, it was one of them. Like he were in bed. He got a phone call. They were in bed with Sharon, and
Ian Thorpe was the name of
Ian Thorpe. Well done. Anyway, he was in bed with Sharon. Got a phone call from old Thorpe, and I'm getting sacked here, Sharon. I'm getting sacked.
So
And
he
indeed
felt
he was.
yeah, he felt aggrieved that it was Thorpe who was the kind of whatever football director type fella rather than Hernandez or Fernandez. Fernandez didn't contact him. And
And
they'd
he
only
knew that because
spoken.
he wasn't taking his phone calls.
Oh yeah, that's what it was, yeah. But so yeah, he's a traditional values man. He likes when people are upfront with him.
Yeah.
He doesn't
Tell
yeah.
me to my face. Look me in the eye when you sack me.
But then he goes off and he does a bit of media work and he has loads of options. Wolves are in for him in the Premier League. He ended up going to Leeds and Ken Bates. But the stuff about El Hadj Diouf was fun, wasn't it? Well, it was interesting
Yes,
enough.
yes, it was fun. Well, it was fun because it turns out, well, it's nice to have an alternative point of view, but in fact, Duffy is a
Quite a nice
decent
man.
enough fellow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
good guy.
he said he was lording a sewer rat for accusing Jamie Mackey of feigning injury when Warnock was at QPR. But it turns out that Duff is a veritable champion amongst men. He's great with the
In
younger
all fairness, I
players.
mean, the whole thing which made people hate him, okay, was that, but that happens all the time, right? I mean, I've seen just this
He
season
spat
people
at someone,
shouting
did
at
it?
Forest play. He spat at a fan.
Okay.
But spitting and football, Johnny. I can remember Mark Lawrenson being like, I'd rather someone punch me in the face than spat at me. It's like, I'd rather someone spat at me, to be honest. Like,
That stuff about Victor Moses, by the way. Fuck, did you know that about Victor Moses?
yeah, both his parents killed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Like, yeah,
Wow. Yeah, so his
yeah,
parents were Christian missionaries who were killed by religious zealots when Moses was 11. Whoa, like that is crazy.
yeah, man.
And I liked all that stuff about essentially, players, careers, the different directions that they take. And he talks again, it's kind of what you were talking about, how he would say that how things suit bigger clubs. But for younger players, they can leave at any point really before a certain age, at least when this book was written. And when a particular younger player, like when there's kind of a Rooney situation or whatever, like where people are really start to excel, the younger players often go to the big clubs. And he says, unless you're someone like, he singles out Raheem Sterling, who's really exceptional and precocious. A lot of these younger players, they get coaxed away by bigger clubs, and then they end up just kind of getting ground down by the massive machinery of a big club. And he talks about particular players like John Bostock. Do you remember him?
Yep, John Bostock.
So that was all. I found that all pretty interesting. I really enjoyed the Chris Kirkland stuff. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Chris he essentially, like Chris Kirkland got punched in the face um, when Warnock was the manager
yeah,
of
Sheffield. It was Leeds versus
Leeds.
Sheffield's
Yeah.
Wednesday.
And a Leeds fan ran out on the pitch and punched Kirkland in the face, and Warnock said on television that Kirkland went down easily. To be punched in the face by a fan. He hadn't actually, and then he hadn't even seen it when he said
Hadn't even
this.
seen the incident, and Sharon was quick to set him straight there, wasn't she?
Yeah. So Warnock is in the bath or coming out of the shower or whatever. He's nude, and Kirkland comes kicking down the door and trying to kick the crap out of him essentially for what he said on television. That was all quite fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Chris Kirkland.
But when he was at Leeds, they also got taken over, and Ken Bates left, and the book peters out a little bit, but that's kind of it.
Well, this is
isn't
the
it?
problem, right? Because it's an ongoing thing. He's still working. I mean, really, you should only write a book after you've retired, right? After you've
Well,
actually retired.
I think a lot of these people are just hyperactive, maybe, and he did it in a period when he wasn't managing.
Yeah.
He says he started managing in 1980 or 1981. Let me see.
Yeah, Gainsborough Trinity, 1980.
And I think the longest he went in the years since was like 4 months or something without working. But that's it, really, isn't it? That's like I said earlier, he finishes the book, an epilogue, which is short, and it's more or less, he's just kind of pining, a nostalgic kind of pay on to days gone by. and saying that he wouldn't be able to manage team today, even though he is managing, or he was up until very recently. That's a fine book, isn't it? That's a fun book.
It is a good book. Yeah, I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I would recommend that book as well. Yeah.
So how are we going to rank this, Johnny?
How are we going to rank
promotions? It's promotions.
Oh, yeah, he's got how many? Was 7 promotions at the time? Was it 4, 7?
I think 7. I think it might be 8 now. I just because he got someone else promoted since. Well done him. Yeah, well, I'd give this 3.5 promotions out of 5. I think
I had 3.5. Yeah, I think it makes a big difference, as you know, I listen to these books, and the ones that I read by the protagonist, the author, it does make a difference, and that is such a nice accent, that Yorkshire accent.
He's got a lovely accent. Yeah, it is. It's the best of all English accents, I think, Yorkshire.
I like that kind of West Country kind of one as well. That's nice.
You sound like you're a bit simple, then, don't you? And so for the next podcast, we'll be doing Savage, the Robbie Savage autobiography.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, Alistair, and thank you, everyone, for listening.
All right.
Take care, buddy.
See you later, lad.
Well. I see some familiar faces here today. Some welcome, some not so welcome. It looks as if I've had the last laugh, and a lot of people who really didn't think I had it in me to become a brilliant priest.
Well, what I say to those people is, look at me now.
But eventually, I got out of his headlock. And now, where are you, Father Eamon Hunter?
Working with some pygmies in the South Seas, and where am I? Here, accepting a Golden Cleric Award.
For being a top priest. Yes, of course. He thought it would be a great idea, great fun, to pour water on this young novice's mattress. But of course, 30 years later...
The smile has been very much wiped
off Father Barry Kiernan's face.
And now, we move on to liars.